Welcome back to Operator Syndrome. We are here and we're closing out Steve's story. So we did mine a few episodes back. Steve was talking about his experiences and what he observed with Extortion 17. And we're going to be closing out his story today. Again, that doesn't mean we're going to stop. We'll be bringing on a couple folks, introducing you to them and their stories. Not quite as long as what we've been doing. I think we took a year, a little over a year to tell our stories. We won't
Yeah,
drag it out that long for these other folks. So we've got Force Reconnaissance Marine or Reconnaissance Marine, and then we've got a buddy of mine, Army Ranger, did time in the sniper section and did some other cool things. Here we'll draw out a challenge. So first off, as always, you got questions, comments, operator syndrome podcast at gmail.com. If you've got a story to tell, we're interested in talking to you.
for sure.
So yes, of course, the first couple of people we bring on are some high speed dudes because that's just sort of the circles we're in. But
Mhm.
we don't care who you are or what your story is. If you listen to this and you know the vibe and you know what we're going for on here and you got something you want to say, we're happy to talk to you. So, and in fact, I'll challenge you. I don't care what your job was, what you did. We can make an episode out of it. So
Yeah,
test us. So if you're the S1 Pat clerk, you think, oh, my story, we'll figure it out.
yeah.
You let us decide that. You let us try it. Because we got some questions for you. Man, do we have some questions for the personnel section. Okay,
Sure.
so today's episode, wrapping it up, we talked about Extortion 17. I thought the last episode was really great because we talked about kind of the aftermath of that, but we also talked about how that affected you. And I think that's important. That's an important part of the operator syndrome piece. It was an
Yeah,
important way to highlight that, those feelings, those emotions, those stressors, it's not just because, you know, you got shell shocked from being in a trench, from getting, an artillery barrage in a trench. It comes from many ways in
yeah,
many of the situations that we deal with as service members. So we talked about that aftermath piece, and um, I think we left off. You had ended back up at the Pentagon,
yeah.
bless your heart. And then you got a talking to by someone with birds on their shoulders,
Hmm.
and then that sort of clicked for you. You're like, all right, screw this, I'm done with this. But what was the next move for you? So you make the decision.
Yeah.
What's the next move?
Well, I had initially intended to mobilize for a full year at Dev Group and was going to go downrange, wherever those guys were, to just minister as a regular chaplain in the field. That got cut short because of Extortion 17. So I wasn't there a full year, but the better part of a year I was there just dealing with this. I mean, it took months to get over and get everything sorted out and to get, I mean, it, I was kind of fried. I mean, we were working a stretch there, man, 2 or 3 months where we were not getting much sleep at night, just going all over the place. So I was kind of fried. I also remember was in my doctoral program at University of Louisville. So I had to file for a leave of absence, which is paperwork that basically freezes my program for military. They have it set up for guys deploying and stuff like that. So I really wanted to get back to my studies, wanted to get that thing knocked out. And so for those reasons, I was back at the Pentagon to complete my last little stint there. And then I talked to this detailer, the guy I mentioned before, who I really liked. He always kind of feeding me ideas, and so I got with him, and he was in and out of the chief's office as a high level detail. He was an O6 detailer, and he said, "Well, we've got a SEAL reserve unit. Well, there's two of them. There's one on the West Coast and one on the East Coast. 18 SEAL Team 18 on the East Coast and SEAL Team 17 on the West Coast, both reserve, all reserves. Now they have active duty people standing up the place, but it's basically drilling and sending augmentees downrange in whatever capacity. SEALs and SWIT guys, special boat guys, but mostly SEALs. So I said, heck yeah, I'd rather be with people I know than, people, a culture that I get. And so got orders to SEAL Team 18 and headed out to Little Creek, Virginia, which is that's the Naval Amphibious Base on the East Coast. And I'd never served on the East Coast as an active duty SEAL. So I was really interested to see the culture differences between the two coasts a little bit. Although at Team 18, we had West Coasters and East Coasters who were just in a reserve capacity. So there was a little mixing of both. But I think I was always kind of insecure. I was definitely kind of insecure when I was at Dev Group because I kind of had a little imposter syndrome going on. I mean, they treated me great and they welcomed me with open arms, but I felt like I've been out. I'm out of touch. Here I am wearing a trident, but I'm not really one of the boys. I just felt a little weird about it. So I struggled. That was a little bit of a struggle for me, even at Team 18, because here's these guys that are still doing the deed, and I'm there to pray with them. The other thing that really burned me out, and I had to complete my time. So it was like 6 years total. But I just it's heavy, and I'll tell another story about we went to the West Coast to drill one weekend. But it was honestly being a chaplain alongside SEALs was really exhausting because it was almost nothing ever good. It was almost always a tragedy, funerals, counseling, that marriages falling apart. It was always something heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of just wanted to run from all of that. Not that I wasn't happy to help in whatever capacity I could, but it just took a toll on me. It just kind of was a dark cloud a lot of times. There were some good interchanges and stuff like that, but boy, the real stuff that you do as a chaplain is, I mean, I didn't do any marriages. Now that would be a happy thing. I
Sure.
didn't do, it was funerals and counseling and darkness a lot. So
Like maybe one family day a year,
yeah,
something
yeah,
like that, and you do that,
right.
or and then probably promotions,
Yeah,
change of commands,
change of command.
but that's not
Yeah.
necessarily a positive thing. That's just
It-
everywhere.
I'm reading a invocation that lasts 30 seconds, so
Exactly.
it wasn't, yeah.
Um, that's interesting. Yeah, because that kind of makes sense. I mean,
Mhm.
it would be mostly negative type issues that you're dealing with. Stepping in to help, you're filling that role, and of course it would take a toll on you. Um,
Well, you remember like when we first met, you and I met. I mean, that's a story.
mhm,
That's an interesting story. But for example, I asked Patrick to go with me. There was a veteran on suicide watch in the VA hospital where we were located. And it was kind of heavy. I mean,
mhm.
it was a guy who was in a bad space. And that's kind of the same kind of sampling of stuff. He's never, I mean, I was glad we could go and hopefully help the guy out, but a lot of it's just helpless feeling stuff.
Yeah. Um, I guess we can say how exactly we met, and we talked
Yeah.
about it a little before, because people have asked before. So, this was after Extortion 17. You were filling in at the church
Hmm.
we were going to at the time one day, and
Hmm.
you're telling your stories. They're like, hey, they're introducing you, and of course they're
Yeah.
like, Navy SEAL,
Mm.
Navy SEAL's gonna come up here, and I, as Ranger, rolling my eyes. Okay, here we
Yeah.
go. Na- Former Navy SEAL. Okay, here we go. Let's hear it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then you gave a fantastic sermon, and
Thanks.
hit the right notes.
Yeah.
That and that was a First Baptist church, and
Yeah.
it can be, they can be a little heavy-handed sometimes,
Oh yeah.
be a little much, and you were it was refreshing. It was refreshing to hear perspective in the line you were walking, while also, telling us to be better folks, right? Um, and I was like, "Okay, pretty good." And I remember I was listening because we always have our ear tuned
Mhm. Yeah.
for authenticity. So I
Oh
was
yeah.
like, "Okay, this guy's a Navy SEAL.
Yeah. Sure.
Let's see if I can call this. Am I gonna have to call this dude out today in front of them?"
Yeah.
No.
Right.
But I was listening, and then there were some key words that you said. I was like, "Okay, this dude's the real deal," because people don't know, not classified stuff.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
a language of the trade. And I was
Right.
like, "Okay, he said that. Okay, this guy's legit, I guess." And I remember being like, "Okay, cool. Glad I showed up this Sunday. All right, cool." And then per usual,
Mhm.
it ends, and, I'm like, "All right, let's get the heck out of here."
Yeah.
Because especially, maybe it's all churches, but churches in in that part of the country, like, I feel like there's a direct
Yeah.
correlation between the amount of time you hang out after
Uh-huh.
church with how many things you're voluntold into doing, you
Yeah.
know? So I'm like, so the longer you hang around, the more things you're helping out with, and I was like, I wanna go home today because I always want to."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Alright, let's get out of here." And then, my wife was like "Hey, you should go intro" he was a Navy SEAL, "You should go introduce yourself." And, like, of course, that's the way they think, but that's not
Yeah.
how we think. It's like,
No, that's
just because 'cause you're a this or a that doesn't mean I'm necessarily gonna go out of my way to introduce
right.
myself. Like, if you had been a Ranger,
Yeah.
then maybe I would have felt compelled to, but you're a
Mhm.
SEAL. I don't necessarily. I'm not just because you're a SEAL doesn't mean I'm interested in coming
Right.
over and talking to you, which some folks listening might find surprising that I'm not impressed just because someone's a SEAL.
Yeah.
And vice versa. SEALs are not
Yeah.
impressed that you're a Ranger or that you're a Green Beret or whatever. We're not impressed.
Yeah.
So, but you did give a good sermon. But I was like, I want to get out. I wanted to get out of there
Yeah.
more than I wanted to meet you. But my wife, who was, um, I was going through some things at the time. I was transitioning. I was going through my own stuff at the time. Um, um, she disappeared on me. I'm shaking a couple hands on my way out. She disappeared, and then I'm like looking around. The next thing I know, she's behind me. She's got this big grin on her face, and then you're right behind her. I'm like, oh my.
Yeah. Here we go. I gotta shake hands with this schmuck.
And I remember shaking her hand, and you were very cool. And I feel like it was right then and there. 'Cause it's not like we didn't
Yeah.
exchange numbers. I think I said, "Hey, great sermon,"
Mhm.
whatever. And I
Yeah.
think right then and there, you were like, "Hey, I know this guy. He's
Yeah.
going through a tough time. Uh, it might be helpful." Um, he's recently served. You
Yeah.
recently served.
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
maybe you could, connect with him. Maybe that might be helpful. And
And
I was like,
you were closer to his age a lot
yeah.
more, and I'm kind of like an old geezer, so I just thought it would be good to have a
Mhm.
recent vet go along who's also, processing.
Yeah, and he was not to give any, like, specific details about his situation, but he was in I don't know what kind of facility you would call it. He was at a hospital, where they were monitoring for, mental health concerns, and, um his story was he was a corpsman, right?
Yeah,
He was a corpsman, and, and
served with the
man,
Marines.
and exactly the type of operator syndrome, like, to
Uh-huh.
a T. Like, he was transitioning out. He was in the reserve unit at your NOSC. Is that right?
Yep,
NOSC?
Third Medical Battalion.
And, he was looking back on it now, God, so he was a corpsman, like a frontline combat corpsman,
Yeah,
but now he was in this reserve medical unit,
right,
um,
right.
where the culture is completely different,
Uh,
not sort of a line infantry
no,
company, so
and
it's a doc separated from his boys.
yeah, and
He's Go ahead.
sorry. For those that don't know, he was a Navy corpsman, but see, Navy corpsmen are the medics for Marines. So they don't have separate medics like the Army has Army medics, but So it's kind of like there's a kind of close overlap sometimes with the Navy and the Marines, just like corpsmen serving Marines sometimes. So he was out there. I mean, he was a pipe hitter out. It wasn't like he was on a ship, giving people physicals. He was frontline Marine,
Hmm.
basically. He was Navy technically, but he was serving with combat infantry unit.
And he, so that's his mindset. He's doing the reserve thing, and I'm interested in hearing your perspective too. Like the reserves, and we talked about my National Guard experience. How much it helps, I'm not quite sure. I
Yeah,
haven't quite made my mind about whether it's helpful or not to do that. But
yeah,
I he was having some relationship trouble. I mean, it's all the same shit that all of us have. We
sucks.
mysteriously have, and then we don't put two and two together.
Yeah,
Relationship problems. I think he might have gotten in trouble with the law a little bit. I don't think he
Sub-
went to jail, but I think he got hooked
yeah.
up. Um,
Substance abuse issues.
yeah,
Yeah, it was the whole package, man.
and
Uh,
um, and
yeah,
we went and talking to him. It was tough seeing him because I was also going through things,
yeah,
but I was like, I haven't thought about it until this moment, but it was like, I'm not quite sure what I was feeling at the time. It
mm,
was, I felt sorry for him. I could
yeah,
see myself in him.
hmm,
I could see myself in him.
yeah,
And I was like, and I had a lot of conflicting feelings. I was feeling like, holy shit, like
yeah,
this guy is me. He
yeah,
talks and he thinks like I think. And maybe he's just further along in this process. Maybe this is where I end up. I'm also thinking like, thank God I'm not as bad as he is.
yeah,
So maybe
yeah,
I'm not really all that bad. There was just a lot of conflicting
yeah.
feelings. I hope it was helpful. I mean,
I think it was just getting him talking to us, and knowing we're combat guys, and we there's just an empathy. I think that's why our operator syndrome could hopefully get vets talking and not and just get out of this suck it up shell, do it on your own. Man, we train so much as teams to fight, and then we have trouble and we want to talk to anybody about it. Well,
mhm.
you know, that it really helps. Just getting, I mean, I was thinking back on that DJ Shipley one. Thought he was going crazy. He's like, man, you ever forget where you are? Nope. You ever have bad headaches, photophobia? Nope. And all these guys, and they were all struggling with the same thing.
I related to this sort of just happened. Someone I served with from back in the day, they got out. They actually retired. So it's weird to know someone you serve
Yeah.
with who's retired. But he
Yeah.
retired, and we were talking about going to Arlington National Cemetery, which isn't too far away from where I am.
Yeah.
And I told him, I was like, he said, "You want to go see so and so?" And I was like, "You know what? I got to be honest. I haven't been to Arlington since I've served, since
Mm,
I've known, and now I know a lot of people who are
yeah.
buried there." And I was
Same
like,
here.
honestly, I've been avoiding the place.
Yeah.
And he said, and he was actually uh, briefly assigned to the unit that does the ceremonies there. So he
Oh
was
yeah.
like, so he had all, and he was like, honestly, I've avoided the place too.
Mm,
And I was like, holy shit. So it's not just
yeah.
me. It's not just me.
Yeah.
And I think that, when we talk to each other about these things, hopefully that's what we get, the light bulb moment. Oh, it's not just me. I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one who's isolating myself. And when we were talking to that guy, that corpsman,
Hmm.
I feel like I don't know how it turned out. So this is just, but in the moment, I felt like I saw him. It's almost like someone's in a fog, and then there's like a brief moment where it lifts because he was talking to two people who understood him and
Yeah.
what he was going through, and then because he's kind of out of his fog, and then he's talking about what he's going to do to fix it, is what
Mm,
I remember. And
yeah.
he was like, it's just kind of like, oh, I got to do this and I got to do this. Okay, I got my plan. And it was just all it was just talking to him,
Yeah.
and he might have felt like he was in this like a dream state. He's at this medical battalion. Who are these people? I can't connect with these people. This isn't what I'm used to. And then two guys sort of come out of the fog and say, "Hey, snap
Yeah.
out of it, dude. You got work
Yeah.
to do. And then hopefully it worked out for him. I don't know. Do you remember what happened to him ultimately? I
He
mean,
got
there are a
out of
lot
there.
of people you interact with, but
Yeah, he got out of there. Yeah, I never I lost track of him. I don't know if he got out or
mhm,
what, but I think he turned the corner. I mean, he did far. I never heard anything terrible happening, but he was in a bad space then.
mhm,
Yeah, it was a depressing place to be. I mean,
mhm.
and yeah, he was there. He was being held for a period of time without he couldn't go anywhere. He was stuck there. So anyway, yeah, I think just talking and you know just having people with empathy in their hearts, taking the time to go over there and I remember he was kind of funny a couple times. He said, "Man, everybody in here is nuts. I can't
Yeah.
talk."
He
uh,
was, yeah, he did say
yeah,
that.
yeah, I remember. But yeah, no, that was good stuff, and that was kind of formed our friendship. Kind of formed in that just going down there.
Yeah, because as much as we wanna pretend as much as we wanna think like we're independent and we're moving on, there unf for better or for worse, there is too much in common for us not to,
Yeah,
glob on to each other, and that's just
yeah.
the way
And then
that's
we
just the way
then
it
we
is.
went out and we did some shooting and just started hanging out and
Uh-huh.
just having a good time, just doing what guys do, just bumming around.
Mhm.
So it's been good. Yeah, it was really good.
So, with the reserve SEAL team, um I mean, I mean, so you're dealing with a lot of the same issues, relationship issues, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you don't go to BUD/S and then go right to a reserve SEAL team, right? You
No,
have to do active duty
yeah, yeah,
time, and then so it's almost like you all have set up a transition space. Do you know, is it relatively do most SEALs end up in the reserve team as they're transitioning? Do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea. I don't think the majority go into the reserves. I think
Okay.
I think maybe 40%
Okay.
maybe getting out. I think most guys it, it kind of like two categories. It's like people who are really done and ready to move on,
Mhm.
or they stay in as a career. So the guys that go into the reserves, they're out of active duty status, but they go to a reserve team. I think it's just a monetary thing
Mm.
and keep some benefits and keep some cash flowing in kind of thing. And yeah, going to school, it helps when you're going to school to have some money coming in.
And those reserve teams didn't exist back in your day, right?
No,
When you were getting
it,
out of active duty?
man, yeah, believe it or not, the only team when I got out, there were only teams 1, 3, 5 on the West Coast, and 2, 4, 6 is kind of over here, and 8 on the East Coast. And that was it. Now they have like 20 SEAL teams. Like I went back. So one of the trips we did, oh, man, this is so we went out on to the West Coast, the East Coast guys, because we were having this big. It was a week long like training, both coasts, both reserve teams together, Huya, and we're in Coronado. We're right there at the amphib base, where SEAL Team 17, the reserve on the West Coast, was located. So we all flew out there. The commanding officer, SEAL, he was a good guy. We really got along. He was a fantastic guy. I mean, still is, but he said, "Yeah, come on out and just let's just go hang." And me being a former team guy, so one morning he goes, we always do PT in the morning. That's just a SEAL thing. You just do it. Even in the reserves, we PT'd every day that we were there doing duty. And so we had a long tradition in the teams of doing a long PT every morning, like a couple hours of PT. It was just part of the job, and we all had a high kind of caliber physicality going on. So this one particular morning, it was it was a Sunday. It was a Sunday, and the CO goes, hey chaps, let's go. We're gonna run the O course, the Buds O course. And I'm like, oh, great. I haven't run that thing in a long time. That'd be fun. Because that, like when I told my story about being in Buds, I was really good at the O course. That was my thing. I could really fly over it. I set our class record on the O course. This O course is so ridiculously hard. And back then it was like I was just climbing over it like a little squirrel. And now here I am, 40 something, upper 40s, not in the best shape, but I was still jogging and running. I mean, I wasn't obese or anything. I was just like I am now. I'm just not in that kind of shape. And I've talked to my friend Tim about this a million times because we love golf and we like to watch pro golfers. And there's this thing happens when guys get into their 40s and they just something goes. They just can't do it anymore. And it's the darndest thing because you're like, well, I always did it if I just try a little harder, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not there. So it seems like it should be there, but it's not. You just don't have those gears. And
Mm.
so I went out and was running this stinking obstacle course. And I mean, they were so hard I could barely get over every obstacle, barely. But I was plugging along, but it took me forever. Like, yeah, like all the guys my age. On the last obstacle, stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's just a low wall that's slanted. You probably had them on your obstacle courses. You just jump up and kick your leg over, and that's it. And it was the last obstacle.
Okay.
I jumped up like this on the thing like I'd done a million times, and I hear this pop. It was like it hurt. It hurt like it felt like a bungee cord broke in my shoulder.
Whoa.
And I mean it hurt. It was like lightning. I'm like, oh, that is not something good. That hurts bad. I couldn't even raise my arm. I was like, mm. And the CO's like, you all right? I'm like, nope. He goes, what'd you do? I was like, I don't know. I don't know. Something popped. And he's like, didn't you do a core warm up or something before you ran? I'm like, what's a core warm up? I'm old school, man. No, I just did like this and then took off. And he was
Finish
like,
that. Finish your Dr. Pepper. Put it down and went to work.
he goes, go to medical and get him to look at it. So I did. So then we get word that right then, like that day. Now I was sitting in medical, and the CO had somebody come and tell me when I to go see him as soon as I could. So I did. I'm limping around with my arm. I could not lift my arm. I could not lift my arm up. It hurt so bad. What had happened is the the muscle, the upper bicep separated from the bone and through whatever those are, ligaments or tendons, I can't even remember. And then I tore labrums, two labrum tears in my shoulder. So I had to have surgery on it to rebuild my shoulder and titanium anchors and all. It was crazy.
Whoa.
So I, I'm walking around with a gimp hand, and I come and I see him, and he goes, you got to get to Pensacola." I'm like, wait, okay. He goes, I'm sending you down there. There's a funeral, a SEAL. We don't know what happened. Long story short, he died on a motorcycle. And this happened a lot. And I guess we'll never know if it was a suicide or not, but we think it was. Like
Mm.
he, you know, guys do it for, we've mentioned this briefly. Guys do it so that they make it look like an accident so that their benefactors can get benefits, and there's and we never know. So I'm just leave it at that. I don't know, but all I know is the family was hurting, obviously really bad, and he wanted me to do the funeral. So I'm like, if this was the next day, this was Monday, right?
Mm.
It's a Sunday afternoon, and I just jacked my hand up. Well, the system, and I don't know if it's different for the active, but in the reserves, we had this, I think it's called DTS, Defense Travel System.
Mm-hmm.
And it was notoriously slow and bureaucratic and clunky. And it usually took anywhere from 3 days to a week to get orders approved, and then thus to buy a ticket. So
Mhm.
I had one day to get out. I flew out that afternoon from Sunday afternoon to get to Pensacola. So they couldn't get me a ticket in time. That's the bottom line. The Navy SEAL Foundation bought my ticket. They said, just put it on your credit card. We'll reimburse you. We don't care. You got to get down there. So that's the kind of stuff the SEAL Foundation does. Just put out another plug.
Mhm.
They help people when the military is in a bureaucratic sludge, and they gap a lot of stuff that helps a lot of people. I think they even flew some of the family members who couldn't afford it out there for the funeral. The SEAL Foundation did.
That's
Anyway,
awesome.
yeah, I bought a ticket, and of course, it wasn't a cheap ticket because I'm buying it that afternoon.
Mhm.
Um, so we flew. We land in Biloxi, Mississippi, I think.
Yeah.
It was
I
a
think so.
two-part flight, and we land in somewhere around there. I can't remember. And lo and behold, there was a storm, and the flight got canceled. My flight got canceled to Pensacola, into Pensacola. So I'm like, I came all this way. Now what? Of course, my luggage was lost.
Of
It
course.
got, of course, it took like 3 or 4 or 5 days to get to me. So there's my dress blues.
Mhm.
So I'm like, how do I get to Pensacola? And I was just asking around. And I'm like, do I rent a car? I got to get there for this thing. This is the next morning. The next morning is this funeral. I think it was about 11 or 12 o'clock, 11 a.m. or 12 o'clock, right around lunchtime or something. So I find a taxi, a guy to drive me. It was like 2.5, 3 hours in a
Whoa.
taxi. Yeah. So that wasn't cheap. I get in at like in the middle. Oh, it was in the like 2 in the morning. I get into this hotel in Pensacola finally. So now what do I do the next day? Well, I rented a car and I drove to like a Nordstrom's or a department store and bought an entire suit, belt, socks, shoes, everything,
Mhm.
so that I could at least be in. I didn't have my blues, man. They're gone. You can't put blues together that quick.
Right.
Not all my ribbons. I mean, no way. So got a suit, got to the got to the funeral, did it. It was very moving. There's a guy, man, there was a SEAL. I forget his name. He was not my generation, but he was paralyzed and he was in a wheelchair. And we do a thing at a SEAL funeral that's usually a wooden casket, and we take our trident and pin it, like hit it with our hand and smash it into the casket. And so at least I was able to get to the exchange and get a trident, so I could at least do that. And all these guys were doing it, and this guy in this wheelchair comes up, and we were like, "Here, you want us to pin it for you?" And he has, "No, man, I want to do it." And these two guys helped him up because he had a use of his upper hands, but he couldn't stand up, and they helped him up. Man, there were some tears flowing watching these two team guys help this guy up who had been something happening. He was paralyzed, and he pinned it, and it was just very meaningful. And I remember the parents came up to me and they said, "You don't know how much it means to have you come out here and tell the commanding officer. It just made all the difference in the world." So it's again another tragedy, another one of these things that it's good to do, but it wears you down.
Mhm.
But what a story that was, man! Just getting there. But I got there um, with a gimp arm the whole time. Like,
Mhm.
don't touch my shoulder, man. I'll shake this hand, but
Yeah.
I was all messed up.
No
So yeah,
no hugs.
no hugs. Yeah. So anyway, that was probably one of my last story. I got out in that year, 2014. That was 2014. A lot happened that year, but I turned in my wings. I'm turning in my wings. I've lost the edge. I can't.
You're
No,
holding on too tight.
holding on too tight. Yeah, gripping. So, but I learned a lot. Um, got to do some good stuff. I think help some people and make some friends. I'll never forget.
With with the last few minutes we have here, just to wrap up, you were you did your thing on active duty. You got out. You were doing your thing in the civilian world. Came back in, felt that sense of duty. Spent about 6 years or so doing it again as a chaplain. When it came time to hang up the uniform that second time, did you feel like did you feel good about it? Did you feel like, okay, I can put this behind me?
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I felt pretty good. I was done. I was just done. And a lot of stuff that originally why I got out of the military
Hmm.
came right back into the forefront of my mind. I'm like, yeah, I knew this is exactly why I got out. It's nothing. The military is just the military, and there's so many things that drive you nuts. You feel like beating your head against the wall. And I will say this: the reserves, at least the Navy reserves, is a parallel universe.
Sure.
It is goofy. I remember we were in the wardroom and all these officers were all reservists. You know, some of these guys are ex-pilots, some of them are whatever. A lot of them were COs of warships and stuff.
Hmm.
And we had to do something, and we couldn't do it because it was so many stupid catch-22s. And it was frustrating all of us because we're like, you got to get this done. And we're like, we don't have the software to do it. And this one officer goes, "This is why the reserves suck balls." He was so pissed. Oh, and we all just cracked up because it was just like we all felt it. So we'd all done active duty time at that
Hmm.
in that wardroom at least. And we were just like, this is why we're gonna go insane. But anyway, yeah, the reserves is a weird world. I think they do some good. I think especially the medical battalion. I mean, they went down and would staff up like a military hospital, a field hospital, and do surgery and do work. So, I mean, that's meaningful work. Others sometimes a lot of one of the things in closing out here is that I got the sense that there's a lot of people that don't want to go downrange and they just want to get the money and drink coffee on the weekends. I'm not judging I'm not thinking of anybody in particular. There was just this general ethos and
Hmm.
be like, oh no, I got called up, I gotta go. And I was like, well, it's kind of reason why I came in is to go
Hmm.
help. But yeah, it's different. It's definitely different than active duty.
Um, okay. Well, on behalf of our listeners, thank you for sharing your story of service twice. Um, and again, question, comments, whatever you got, Operator Syndrome Podcast at gmail.com. We'll see you on the next one.